We all lazily ask at various times in our lives what the purpose of life is. Well, I'm going to tell you what the purpose of life is for free. You can stop all your searching because it's actually very simple. The purpose of your life is to acquire power. Now, that sounds like it's some kind of layer of activity that you might put on top of your ordinary activities, but it isn't. You are already doing it. And we all do it because without power we cease to exist. Without money you starve and you freeze to death, or whatever the climate around you might do to you. Without any support from any other people, then when you're ill you may perish, and so on and so forth. So we're all after power. Now, the way we get this power varies. We, because of our childhood and various conditionings, learn the best way to acquire power. For many people, acquiring power means going with the herd, because the herd has power. If you've ever stood in a football stadium, you will understand what power is when 20 or 30,000 people are chanting a particular chant. There's an awful lot of power in that. It's an animal thing. There's no reason or rationale involved in that. And in fact, it's well known, the psychologists know very well, that crowds are dangerous things. They have no morals. They have no boundaries that they will not go beyond. Crowds are cruel and vicious things. But anyway, we identify with crowds, and the crowd may be as small as our family unit, which we believe to be our support mechanism and our insulation against a wider hostile world. Or it may be our nation, and right now we're seeing a lot of patriotism and nationhood sentiment being displayed. The emergence of the far right. In Britain the situation is particularly bad. The Brexit was caused by a new surge of nationalism, and this nationalism is not for anything particularly, but it is against some of its own people, which I'll get onto in a moment, and it's also against people who come into the country, immigrants and foreign workers. The British believe that their declining empire and their declining fortunes are wholly due to external circumstances, to the economic union of Europe, or the EU, or to people who are coming into the country and working, or to the people who are the poorest and the sickest in society. And as Michael Moore said, the British society is a broken society. When he was doing his round the world trip to look at the good features in particular countries, the education system, the health systems and so on, he totally avoided Britain and said this is a broken country, there's nothing there that's good. Now, I'm ranting a little bit about Britain because obviously I'm British. I don't live in the UK anymore, and I'm quite happy about that. I live in Europe, and I look on with amazement at what is happening in the country that I once loved very dearly. I was very, very happy to be part of the United Kingdom until about 10 or 15 years ago. So here is what is happening. Here is what power is doing to the people in the United Kingdom. Because they have diminishing power, and I'll get onto this in a moment, but because they have diminishing power, they are feeling angry, they're in pain, and the government very conveniently picks scapegoats. The first scapegoats to be targeted were the poor, the unemployed, and the sick. The newspapers, the right-wing newspapers in the United Kingdom, ran and still run almost on a weekly basis stories of people who are unemployed, fiddling the system. They don't cover the hundreds of thousands who are not fiddling the system, but they find the odd one who's found a loophole and is fiddling the system. This creates resentment and hatred amongst the people who pay taxes and go to work, and everybody gets tarred with the same brush. There's a very good film out at the moment called I, Daniel Blake, that catalogues what's happening to the most dispossessed and the weakest people in our society, the people with the least power. They are required to jump through hoops. They have been they are subject to effectively chronic abuse by the officials that execute the benefits and social security system in Britain. These people have become like the prison warders in the Stanford prison experiment, an experiment that had to be abandoned because these were just two sets of people. One set of people were told to be prisoners, another set of people were told to be wardens. They were all students. They just had to act these parts, and in the end the experiment had to be abandoned because the wardens were abusing the prisoners. Human nature, this lust for power manifesting when some individual is given a little bit of authority over other people. And in the Department for Works and Pensions in the United Kingdom, these officials that deal with the weakest in our society, the people who need the most help, have become little tyrants. Not all of them, of course, but many of them. And so they treat these people in appalling ways. And it's not uncommon in the United Kingdom now for people to be starving because they have no means of support, because they've arrived 2 minutes late for an appointment, or whatever trivial reason can be conjured up. Anyway, that was the main thrust of the government's attempt to deflect blame effectively upon their own incompetence. The next effort was aimed at immigrants, people who are coming in from the EU to work, and from other places. And in fact, I think the UK has more people from other locations coming in to both immigrate and to live in the country and to work than the EU. But anyway, the EU is picked out as the source of the problem. And this created sufficient resentment that the British voted to leave the EU last year, with dire consequences not only for Britain, but there will be repercussions in Europe as well. So, I talked about that rather longer than I expected, but I'm really trying to illustrate the nature of power. And maybe some of what I've just said will become clearer when I talk about power. We are all seeking power in some way or other. Some of us seek power through our families, others seek power through money, some through career, some through fame, some through whatever means you want to imagine. There are as many ways of seeking power as there are people on the planet almost. But power is what we want, and all that power is always directed towards a greater sense of existence, a more secure existence, because we, like the animals, strive on an ongoing basis to secure our existence, to make sure that we persist into the future. It's whether you call it a blessing or a curse depends on your perspective, but anyway, it's the thing that is passed on to us through our genes, this drive for survival. We would be totally useless to nature if we had no incentive to continue the struggle to exist, for a whole pile of reasons, survival of the fittest and all that kind of thing. This drive makes sure that only the fittest go on to survive. It's a cruel regime, and it's one that human beings could, if they wished, moderate to some extent, although there's no real signs of that happening, particularly at the moment. So This notion that we're all after power to ensure our survival may be insulting to some people, particularly New Age type people who believe that they're beyond all that kind of thing, but of course they're not. New Age people, well, I know some New Age people, and they will do anything other than hard work to actually try and become wealthy. So, you know, imagining wealth, focusing on it, they believe will bring some level of material well-being without actually having to do anything. But anyway, the aim is the same. They want the same things. They want material wealth. They want good health. They want, well, a lot of them actually want to be quite notorious in their own way. So they're seeking fame as well. Many people just do it through their family. Their family is their source of power. It's their little survival nest, if you like. Even though families are very often putrefying little nests of bad emotion and resentment, people still stick in there because they believe it is their best guarantee of survival. So I talked about the British particularly being in pain because their empire has declined. There's been a loss of empire. There's a huge amount of sentiment for the past. Most of it just pure imaginary, but nonetheless a lot of sentiment for the past. So they're living in pain, and they're living in pain because their power has diminished as a nation. Britain is still trying to play the global card. You hear the Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, saying Britain's going to be a global free trade leader and all this sort of nonsense. Well, I imagine that China and India and even the United States and many countries in Europe couldn't give a damn about Britain saying it's going to lead the world in free trade. So diminishing power causes pain. This happens at a personal level, of course. So if you have £1 million in the bank and you make a bad investment and end up with 100,000, you're going to feel pain. If you become ill, you're going to feel pain because your survival mechanism is being challenged, and that's all that pain is. It's your prospects of survival being diminished. It's just the survival instinct. The ancients called it the conatus. It's if you look at it objectively, it's a very cruel and wicked thing, because what it means is that people will automatically, as all animals are, be in competition for resources and for power that means they dominate others. So in the world today, we see more than ever a few people dominating the fortunes of huge swathes of the population. And this imbalance is just an imbalance of power, and there seems to be there seems to be no real way of addressing it. On the other hand, when our power is increased, when we feel our survival prospects are enhanced, we feel pleasure. So, great Aunt Gertrude leaves you $1 million, and yes, you're going to feel pleasure. You become well after some life-threatening illness. Yes, you're going to feel pleasure. You become famous for writing a book. Well, depending on whether you like fame or not, personally I would hate it, but some people just crave external approval and see it as a sign of power, and so fame would be a good thing for them. And so human beings are no different to animals. Not only no different, worse in some ways. The problem for human beings is that they have a brain that has allowed them to create things like the atom bomb and very, very efficient means of destroying each other. Whereas animals, which are fairly stupid in that respect, at least have to do it one at a time. If a lion doesn't like being challenged for his dominion of the pride, then he can kill the challenger. But it's just one animal at a time. Human beings can do it thousands at a time, no problem. And of course, potentially millions at a time. So that's the reality of our existence. Now, it all sounds fairly bleak, I suppose, in one way, which is why we all seek, I suppose, some kind of belief system. Scientists believe in the beauty and the majesty of science, and turn a blind eye to the reality of what's going on. And that's a very good way of getting lost. I studied science, physics for several years when I was young, and I was totally oblivious to what was going on in the world. It was very nice, and it's quite tempting to go back there again. And other people numb themselves by constant entertainment, playing video games, going to the movies, watching TV, anything that really takes their eye off what is the reality of life. And then when life hits them, the death of a dear one or their own illness or whatever, then they say, why me? They say, why me? Because they've been totally oblivious to the suffering of everyone and everything else all their lives. And they cannot believe that it's happened to them because they thought they were a special case. There is a way out of all of this. And unfortunately, the first thing you have to do is look the beast in the face. The beast is the conatus, the survival instinct. It creates all the suffering for human beings because we are constantly trying to essentially exploit others to enhance our own power, and we're constantly competing for the resources. So most of us don't mind that I think it's about 15,000 children a day die from the fact they can't get proper water supplies, whereas we can just turn the tap on and there's a nice clean water supply there. And the fact that child labourers and very poorly paid workers in various nations allow us to buy our various goods, clothes, electronic goods, whatever, at a reasonable price. We just turn a blind eye to it. But in actual fact, because we turn a blind eye, we are participators in that whole exploitation scheme. This is the reality of it. So you have to look the beast in the face. Once you've looked the beast in the face, then you can decide to yourself whether you want to participate in that or not. And not participating, of course, comes at a price. But that's a decision that people have to make. Are you going to be part of the whole lying, rotten scheme that is essentially human life? Or are you going to be a person of principle and try to live according to some of your own heartfelt convictions? Well, that's difficult. Either way, there's a price to be paid. You just have to make the choice.